Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 22, For the Cause. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as we say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great. We're awesome. We're a great time. And if you listened at all to our 100th episode, that was the super big, long, everything about us and then some episode, you'll know that we really enjoy this show and we have a lot of things we like to cover each and every week. So we try our best to get to it all, but we just can't. So, hey, we're going to still make the shot anyway. This week we are returning back to our regular scheduled programming here with For the Cause. I feel like I say this a lot, an interesting episode to say the least, but in this case I feel like it's particularly so because we're dealing definitely with some of the more, shades of gray things involving, Starfleet and the Federation and some of the other
Right.
groups that they're associated with. And then we have a unusual, I will say, B plot that yeah, I think we're gonna talk about that one first because it's been in my
Let's
brain.
go ahead,
Yeah,
Garrett. Come on,
yeah.
Garrett. Put on it, boy.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna get into a lot of things tonight, and I hope you enjoy all of that, of course. But before we do, as always, I'd like to check in. David, how has your week been?
It's been good. Been okay. It's been fine. Work is a little strange because this is the Labor Day sale this weekend, and it's always one of the big sales of the year. But this year has also been starting to feel a little funky, and like today wasn't nearly as busy as you might want to hope for on a big holiday weekend like this. And so we'll see if things change. But in the meantime, I finished reading Woke in Furies, the third Altered Carbon book. The Altered Carbon show I mentioned. I've been reading all the books. This is the last one of the three that he wrote. It unfortunately isn't quite as good as I was hoping. There was more in common with the second season of the show in this third book than there was in the second book. The second book only had like a few minor details plucked and brought into the second season, whereas this one, I'd say maybe 25% of the story was like inspired by this book. But unfortunately, I just don't think that I would have some direct critiques for the author if you were ever to want to hear my 2 cents on anything.
We
But
should do.
it's not like it was a
Maybe we
bad
should do
book.
like an
But
After Dark where we talk not just about the Expanse, but then you can tell me about those books. I don't think I will actually read them, but I have watched the
right,
show, so I would like to, know your
yeah,
take from there.
I'd be happy to. It's not. The first book is good. I think the first season of the show, which was very heavily inspired by the book, really, and I've said this, I think our second, I'm sorry, the first season of the show took the first book and really benefited from like improving some on the plot quite a bit. The second and third books, basically the plots are not as interesting. The first book is a mystery. It's basically a mystery in a sci-fi setting, and mysteries are always fun in general. And the second and third books don't have mysteries that they're dealing with. They're dealing with other things, and it makes it for a harder storytelling. But anyway, I was going to say that what I'm going to read next, in preparation for 9/11's anniversary this year, is Fall and Rise by Michael Zukov. Apparently, this is a pretty, it's like the definitive story of what happened during 9/11 from the perspective of the people who were affected by it, the people on the planes and in the towers. So I look forward to that. It was a seminal moment in my life. I'm sure you would agree, Perry. It was
Oh, yeah,
I remember that day. I was 11 years old.
I absolutely remember
So,
it. I remember it. I remember where I was. I was in high school, as a matter of fact. Um, I think it was my freshman year, maybe.
yeah.
And yeah, I remember. Not to take over your entire story
No,
there.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I remember just sitting in my English class, and another English teacher ran into the classroom and said, "Turn on your TV. The World Trade Center has been hit." And we were all like, "Hit with what?" Like we were stupid kids, hit with what,
What's the World Trade
And
Center? Yeah.
right. And so we turned it on, and we just saw the one building and the smoke and everything, and everybody was just asking, what happened? Like we caught it so late, and it took a while of watching, and they were saying, a plane hit it, and I was like, oh, terrible accident and all that stuff. And then as we were talking about it, we watched as the other plane flew into the other tower,
Yeah.
and I remember just being like, no way,
That's not a
that's got
coincidence.
to be fake. Like, yeah, that's my first thought. That's got to be fake.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
of course, the chaos that ensued from there. I mean, that was one class, and then we had one more class, which was just basically sitting there watching TV the whole time, and then we didn't even make it to the third class. They sent everybody home.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
crazy day.
yeah. I remember hearing about
Jeez.
it from another kid at the lunch table. I was at like I had the early lunch of my class. I was in sixth grade, and so it was probably like 10 o'clock or so, 10 to 10 and 11. That's what I'm thinking, at least trying to remember back to it. And yeah, I don't know if we went home early, but certainly I remember being home by the afternoon and like watching TV and watching the fallout of everything happening. And like as an 11-year-old kid, like that being like, wow, like this is something going on, and really having a lot of strong opinions for an emotions maybe is the better phrase, but intense. But anyway, we're looking forward to reading that. My mom read it; she liked it. I feel like it's a perfect time to read it because it'll be the anniversary by the time I finish it. So I look forward to telling y'all how it is. Again, apparently it's like the definitive book on what happened. So um,
Okay.
yeah, a little more somber subject, but
Yeah, to say the least.
yeah, for sure. But then yeah, yeah. Anything new with you? What's going on with you, Perry?
Well, I have officially fallen into the colossal, I don't know, what do you want to call it, time suck that is the anime show One Piece. And
Oh, okay. I've
it
heard of it, but
is
I don't know it.
it's like the never ending anime. Like,
That's what
I'm
That's what it sounds like. I've seen the mangas on the bookshelves, and it's like infinitely long.
yes. I mean, it just never seems to end. I'm in season, I'm gonna say 5, I think, maybe 6. I don't know. But it's interesting because it's kind of a fast watch to a certain degree, each episode, is about 20-25 minutes long, but of course every episode features a little bit of a recap before they get into the new material, so you're really watching maybe 20
20 minutes.
minutes of new material,
Right.
and then of course you get the inevitable clip show episode and the rehashing and all that other kind of stuff. But again, there just seems to be a never ending, you know journey here to get to this other area where they're trying to get to. So I find the characters very interesting. I like, you have the stupid one, the sword fighter, the doctor, the whomever, like all these different types of, characters
Right.
bumbling around here trying to figure out their lives basically while they fight off bad guys and make new friends and connections and so forth. But um, overall, just to say, I've really enjoyed it. Like surprisingly so. Um, Between that and obviously we just finished the fourth book in the Expanse series, giving myself a little bit of a breather there before I pick up the fifth one. So
Right.
for those of you following along, it's this one right here.
Nemesis Games.
Yeah, this will be the next one, number 5. We'll start that probably next week, I guess.
I don't know if you've had a chance to glance inside the book, but do you know the little
I have
I mean,
not.
so
I have not had a chance to look at anything.
I quickly glanced inside because I was curious. Because remember in this show, this is the season where all of our main characters go their separate ways for a time. And
Oh,
so each of our four main characters are now a point of view character in this book. Nemesis
okay.
Games, we get Alex, we get Amos, we get Naomi's perspectives, according to what I glanced at least. I didn't like read
Well,
anything,
good.
but
Well, good. I think that was definitely necessary considering, we were branching into complementary characters quite a bit in the other books. So
right.
I'm glad to see that they've kind of returned to our core cast. I have not taken a look, but did you happen to glance and see if Avasarala had her own chapters
I
or
did
not?
not. I
Oh,
hope so. I hope so. I mean,
I really hope so too. She's fantastic. I don't know. Um,
season
yeah.
5
However,
when
yeah.
she goes. Oh yeah, I'm
Hmm.
sorry. When Amos goes to the moon, he sees her in the show. So I'm hoping
The
that something
Amos
happens.
and Avasarala interaction should be in there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but no, I have not taken any other looks into the book or anything like that. I've just got it. I'm ready to go on that. Again, probably start that next week. Actually, I might even start it on Monday, considering Monday is a holiday, and I'll have the whole day. Look, normally I would be working on Monday, but
Right.
won't. School is out for the kids, of course. They get Monday and Tuesday off, so a 4-day weekend for those little
Nice.
disease-carrying blighters.
Mm.
And then, I don't know if you were aware, but there was also that shooting in the Arboretum a couple
Oh.
of days ago. Yeah,
No.
so keep an eye out for that. Well, I mean, there's nothing to keep an eye out for at this point. There is one person was injured. The gunman turned the gun on themselves, killed
Oh.
themselves. But yeah,
Oh my
that's been
gosh.
going on these past few days as well. So, knew some people who were in the Arboretum. Everybody that I knew was fine, of course, but it was just very tragic, shocking, of course, whenever there is,
Yeah.
gun violence and everything like that. So it
I
just
drive by
was
the
on my mind.
Arboretum every day to work, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have to look
So,
into that.
so
That's
yeah,
crazy.
just be aware and as much as possible, people just be safe when you're out there. But yeah, that's essentially been my week working and then trying to get through everything. My family's doing well, so we're good.
Right.
But we're not here to talk about any of that. We are here to talk about For the Cause. As we said, an interesting episode. So, would you want to give the recap, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, I think this is a you episode for sure.
I will. I will take that. I will
Let's do
definitely
it.
take that. All right. So this episode starts with us checking in on our favorite station family, the Ciscos, and we see a more intimate side of Ben Cisco as he's laying next to freighter captain Cassidy Yates, who we talked about not in the our last episode, but the one before that, how we hadn't really seen much of Cassidy, or in particular the Cassidy and Ben Cisco relationship.
Right.
Now we see that they are spending time together, spending nights together. They're clearly
Does
very
Cassie really need
comfortable.
her own cabin on the station anymore?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Does she really need it, or is she, yeah? Just how close is she to the station commander?
Right.
So she's obviously trying to get up and get herself going to work. She's got meetings and everything else. He is laying in bed, you know. But then we see it flash forward, and he's got his meetings with his staff, and they're letting them know that there is a shipment of Federation Grade 12 mass replicators coming to the Cardassians because the Cardassians, having been devastated by their continued war with the Klingons, now need these to help get their infrastructure back up and running. Kira's a little bit upset about this because when the Federation came through to help out the Bajorans after the occupation, they only sent two of these types of replicators to them. But Eddington quickly points out that, your Bajor is one planet. The Cardassians have basically an empire that they need
Right.
to, maintain. So the worry is that the Maqui or some other ne'er do wells are going to take advantage of this and try to hijack the replicators. So the station is put on tight alert. Before the meeting breaks up entirely, Eddington and Odo come to Cisco and say, "We've got reason to believe that there is a Maqui smuggler living on board the station." They kind of hem and haw about actually telling Cisco who it is before they finally drop the bomb that they suspect that it is Cassidy.
Right.
Cisco, of course, flies into a little bit of, his anger kind of, pops up on him a bit. He lets them walk him through their circumstantial evidence
Right.
as to why they think it's Cassidy, and basically says, we're going to watch. We're not going to take any direct action against her just yet. She is a Federation citizen until proven otherwise. So at this point, we're going to watch.
Right.
Um, they do begin to discreetly surveil Cassidy and her crew. They try to do uh, a security check under the guise of a health inspection. That doesn't go over too well. So she's able to depart the station, but he sends Worf and O'Brien and whomever else on the Defiant to follow her and see where she goes.
Right.
Instead of making the delivery that she said she was going to, she actually diverts to the Badlands, which we know is this kind of chaotic area of space filled with plasma storms and ion eddies and whatever else. That basically makes it very hard for ships to be tracked in this area, which is an ideal location for the Maquis to make secret drops.
Right.
They do watch her make one of these drops. Um, and report back to Cisco that apparently, yes, she did meet with the Maqui ship. She transported over a large portion of her cargo, which, based upon what they can tell, was probably food or medical supplies. Dax tries to soften the blow a little bit. First time we actually see Dax. Dax tries to soften the blow a little bit and say, well, at least, she's not, a gun runner. She's doing food drops, basically.
Right.
But that doesn't really help Cisco at all because, again, Cisco is a Starfleet officer, and as we can remember, all the way back in season one, two, I think, he was the one tasked with stopping the Maquis at one point.
Right.
Lost his friend uh, because of the Maquis. So the decision is made that in the event that she needs to make another run, they are going to arrest her and the Maquis officers that she meets with. Eddington is kind of on the fence about doing this, basically saying, that's your girlfriend. I don't want to be involved with actually arresting your girlfriend. Can I oversee the replicator situation while you go handle that? Cisco understands and agrees. So Cisco takes command of the Defiant, goes out, follows Cassidy. They go back to the Badlands. Um, Nothing happens. They're basically in a holding pattern for hours and hours and hours before Odo finally points out something is not right here. This should have, been done. What's going on? They realize that, they kind of have to beam over to Cassidy's ship to figure it out. They do, and realize that the actual package has been delivered in the form of Cisco and much of his senior staff are on the Defiant. So there's no one
Right.
really on the station to stop the reclamator situation. And this is where we now see who the true Maquis leader is. It's Eddington. Eddington has
Yeah.
basically maneuvered everybody to be far away and out of communication with the station. He shoots Kira, locks her in the conference room, deploys the station deputies to actually help him steal the replicators. And by the time the Defiant makes it back to the station, he's gone. He contacts Cisco
Right.
and basically says, "Don't help the Cardassians, and we'll leave you alone." Cisco's like, "Yeah, right. I'm coming after you," and that's how we
Right.
essentially end that story. Our B story involves Garrick with Bashir at a spring ball match in which Kira is playing. But instead of paying attention to the match, Garrick is watching this very young, beautiful Cardassian woman who is none other than Tora Zial, the young, Cardassian refugee, daughter of Ducat, who was rescued from the uh, desert planet where the Breen were making them all be, uh, soldier, slave labor.
Right.
He keeps watching her. Bashir tries to warn him. He doesn't listen. They end up getting trapped in an elevator together. They kind of do this weird flirting thing where they're both saying, "Hey, you don't have anything to worry. I'm not going to hurt you." Weirdest flirtation
Right.
ever. Hey, I'm not going to stab you. Hey, I'm not going to stab you. All right. You know, very weird Cardassians, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, they eventually arrange to have this, hot rock date. And Kira finds out about it. She corners Garrick in his shop, presses him up against the wall, basically threatens him, don't go through with it. He decides he's going to anyway. He does. They end up in the holodeck in the rock sauna where they have a yet another heart to heart about why they're not actually going to kill each other and lay on the rocks like giant lizards that they are. That's essentially that story. There's more to it, but we're obviously going to get into that. But that's essentially the episode. And as always, if you haven't seen it or you want more of the minutia details, go watch it. It's on
Right.
Paramount. You can watch all of the treks on Paramount right now. Go watch it. But otherwise, do you think that's a pretty accurate enough summation there? Did I hit
I
enough?
think
All right,
so.
great. So
Yeah.
as I said, we're going to talk about this. We have to start with the RB story because wow,
Garrick.
yes. When you realized who the girl was and obviously saw the angle they were going with, mutual attraction, what were your first thoughts? Be honest. What did you think?
Well, the first thing is that this girl is maybe
Thank
18. Like, I
you.
don't know if she's even.
We don't even know how
Yeah.
old she is, and I don't think that she's even 18. I think they're trying to make us think she's 18. I don't think that she's 18.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last time we heard about her, which is earlier this season, she'd been, I think you said, like 5 years on this prison camp, but she had been not quite a teenager when, like, her mother was Bajoran, the paramour of Gul Dukat, and he had been sent on this mission to go kill her, basically, because of this weird, you have to kill the shame of whatever.
Yes, hide its shame.
Anyway, yeah, so yeah, when we meet her, I think it was this season, right? Like she's supposed to be a teenager, and if she's aged at all on the station, it's not been quite a year. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so when we
if
first, just to do the backtracking, when we first saw her, I believe that she was no older than 12 or 13 when she was in the prison camp. Then, when she was ultimately rescued from the prison camp, she then spends time with Ducat, who has fallen from grace. We don't know how much time had passed between the rescue and now her on the ship with him. And we watch that whole, he goes from captaining a freighter, he
right,
hijacks a Klingon bird of prey, and they're on the bird of prey for a while. She comes with Kira in that mission where they
right,
got the bird of prey. She brings Zial to the station. So,
right,
like you said, it hasn't been like 5 years. It was a few months,
right,
maybe. And
right,
now she's on the station, and she's been on the station, as she says, for about a year.
right.
So if she was 12 or 13 then, that means at the most she's 14.
Yeah, I'll be generous and say 15, but yeah, that's the first question. Is like you seem a little young, and I don't know how Cardassians treat. When do they consider themselves adults? Let's just assume that everyone says 18. She seems a bit young. Not only does she seem a bit young, but Garrick is in his at least late 40s, if not 50s. So
Right. Even if
again,
even if she
she
was
is the
18,
daughter.
right. Even if she was
Yeah,
18, he is still too old for her.
right.
Um,
She is the daughter of his greatest rival in the Cardassian government, and they were both, men, been men for a long time.
right.
So
They
she seems
worked
young.
together at one point. They were junior officers together. They were up and
Yeah,
comers together. So before she was a thought in her father's brain, these two were, wheeling and dealing in Cardassian
right.
society and stuff. At one point, she even says, my father said you had my grandfather killed. He's old enough to have known your grandfather. Like, and not only that, but
Yeah,
he directly influenced his life, and you
yeah,
still are like, well, let's lay all these rocks together. Cardassians are
right.
weird. Great
Yeah.
architecture, awesome clothes, terrible society values, man. They're just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels strange. I mean, I will say this. If outside of the awkwardness of all the age issues, part of me likes the idea of like romances are fun usually. They're usually fun storylines. So part of me likes the idea that Garrick is got a crush on someone and he's trying to flirt. Like the whole I don't intend to hurt you angle is kind of funny because it's exactly how he views everything. So when he says it to her and then she says it to him, like as a flirtation, like way of flirting, maybe it would work with the girl. Like, you're I don't know. In this situation,
Again, I think that is definitely a societal thing. I don't think that there's any woman
well,
I could ever come
yeah.
up to and be like, "Hey, baby, guess what? I don't intend to hurt you."
Well, I mean, in this situation, 100%, that's exactly right. It's societal. My point though is like, it is kind of funny. You're a guy and you're known for having violence in your past, and you go up to a woman and your first reaction, because you're both awkward around each other, being like, "I'm not going to hurt you," and her reaction being like, "Oh, I'm not going to hurt you either," because that's exactly we later find out that's exactly what he thinks. He thinks that she's going to assassinate him in the Hollow
Right.
Suite, and the
I
reason that
really
Kira
did.
came to
Yeah.
talk to him was to talk to him to
Lull them into
convince
a
him that
false sense of
actually
security.
everything. Yeah, it's all this big, just giant.
Leave it to Quark to sow
Yeah.
the seed there, because he
Well,
was
that's so
like,
funny too,
yeah,
because he's like, that's too complicated.
like,
As he
maybe that's what
smirks,
she wants you to think. You let your guard down and she kills you.
they're a meter too long. Now they're a meter too. Yeah.
And
Whole thing is hilarious.
now we know where that Ferengi gets his stylish clothes from. That ornate pattern there, that he
Yeah.
was. that he was sporting, one of his more famous outfits. Hey, not for nothing, but Garrick seems to be a pretty accomplished tailor. I'm going to need Jake to stop by and fix himself because all of his clothes are
Oh, come on!
terrible.
At this point, I think we can say whose fault that is at
Oh
this point,
yeah,
don't you think?
Ben Cisco has no sense of style either. He's wearing some terrible clothes in this episode, mismatched patterns, all the rest of it. It just, yeah, bothersome.
Yeah,
But that's like
yeah.
that's quintessential just Trek fashion in general. In all the shows, all of their off-duty clothes look horrible. No wonder you guys wear your uniforms all the time. You don't have any sense of style or function. Nothing.
Otherwise, yeah.
Nothing at all. I can remember,
Yeah.
in fact, Captain Picard sporting some obscenely short shorts when he went on vacation in Riza. So, man,
Yeah, which was
oh,
mentioned in
good
this
lord.
episode. We'll
Yes,
have to get to
Riza
that.
was mentioned in this episode, our favorite pleasure planet.
Yeah. Speaking of which, that's probably a good transition point. Shall we?
Finally, to the A story,
Yeah.
the evolving Cisco relationship and the Cardassian Maqui Klingon struggle. We haven't heard about the Maqui in a while. This is our first real update as to what's been going on with them. So to recap that story a little bit, the Maqui were obviously a big thorn in the side of both the Federation and the Cardassians for a while. But the Cardassians are
Mhm.
doing a pretty good job of starting to wipe them out. Now that the Klingons have invaded and they've helped to basically shift the focus of the Cardassian military to the Klingon problem, the Maquis have basically had free reign throughout the demilitarized zone in the Badlands, and they've just been striking at
Right.
Cardassian targets left, right, and center. So
Right.
yeah, they've basically gotten to a point where, as Worf says in the episode, they have finally achieved the ability to drive the Cardassians out of the demilitarized zone permanently. And
Right.
this demilitarized zone, as we all recall, was actually established in the Next Generation season 7, I believe, when they
Yeah.
signed that
The
treaty.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's the whole episode where they have to help the Indian. They're trying to help Native American group. Like, we need you to abandon the planet and come back to the Federation territory. And the Native Americans are like, we've been kicked off our land so many times. No, we're gonna put up. We're gonna stay here with the Cardassians and take our chances. Interesting episode.
It was an
Interesting
interesting
point
episode.
to make. So
The one that I still don't agree with. Um, yeah, I understand what they were trying to do, but when you have the ability to basically gift someone a whole planet, there's very little objection I can think of that would make that not palatable. So yeah,
I agree. I felt like they were making
yeah,
a big mistake. Um, it's like you're asking for
yeah.
more trouble,
Which
frankly.
we
But I
show
get it.
is
I
actually
mean,
what happened. I mean, by not leaving and this establishment of the demilitarized zone, it did cause a lot of problems, which is where the Maquis gained kind of their grassroots foundation. So it was a
right,
problem. They did cause a problem. Um,
right,
so I do like that. I do like that if you think about it, you can track the beginnings of the Maquis because here was because they didn't exist until that demilitarized zone and that was established via that treaty. And then
right,
we watched as those problems evolved and these people were fighting for their homes, and it became a lasting impact on the structure of the Federation. And now we are seeing it play out once again here on D Space Nine, and they're influencing the greater politics of the area. And now they've also gained supporters from the Bajorans because the Bajorans don't like the Cardassians and fought their own, oppressive war against them. So they know what that's like to be the
right,
underdog fighting this huge enemy. And of course, they have found sympathy there. So they're gaining
right,
traction, they're gaining strength. And now the Klingons have swooped in and made an even, uh, more devastating blow against the Cardassians. So a greater opportunity for the Maquis to strike a blow against them too. So the Maquis are actually doing quite well. And now they just got
right.
their hands on 12 CFI industrial replicators from Starfleet. So now they have machines
Yeah,
they need to make homes and build reactors and ships and all kinds of things. So yeah, they're moving up
Yeah,
in their threat assessment.
yeah, yeah. The Maquis are certainly a great gray, an affiliation that fits in the gray zone. I mean, perfectly so. They are in the demilitarized zone. Cardassia is abusing the treaty. The Maquis are having to defend themselves against the Cardassians, but in doing so, they allow the Cardassians the chance to say that the Maquis are not obeying the treaty that the Federation is supposed to enforce. And if Federation is forced to enforce a treaty for people for whom they no longer have direct control over, and it's a great moral tale about the difficulty of borders and military gray areas. Um, I will say though that I do the way things went down this episode. I feel like Eddington suddenly revealing himself as the Maquis came out of nowhere, and
Really,
the way he just left. Uh, what's her
Kira,
face? Sorry,
when he shot her,
not Kira. No.
Cassidy.
Girlfriend, Cassidy. He left Cassidy to take all of the fallout. Like I know she came back to the station of her own volition, but she didn't have to because Odo was not allowed to leave a security detail and
Well,
all
that was
that
a
Cisco
test. That was
keeps
definitely a
that at.
test.
And
Cisco was testing her, and he even says so, or she says so,
well,
and he doesn't. He certainly doesn't correct her. Um,
well, I he didn't do his job as captain by letting her get a
well, hey,
chance
he
to
was
prove
supposed to. He
herself.
was
I mean,
showing he
I
was
get it.
emotionally distraught.
I know, but I have critiques for Cisco in this
Oh,
episode too,
yeah.
as a character, as is what he's doing. But yeah, I feel like kind of out of left field. Expect her not to be a changeling all during the final like 5 minutes.
Oh,
Like the
I've
changelings are
okay. I can see that, thinking that he was going to
yes.
be a
I
changeling.
I
But
wanted
I
to be a
always
changeling.
knew
I
he was a
loved that
bad guy.
idea.
I always knew
Well,
he was a bad guy. Even going back, I distinctly remember the very first time I ever saw the character of Eddington, and I knew I was like, that guy right there, he's going to be our villain at some. And it actually started to make me mad. I remember watching during the original run, whenever he wasn't the villain or when he did something
mm,
else, and I was just like, just throw him in the brig already. Like, get rid of
yeah.
him. I did not like him. I
Well,
just didn't like him.
I mean, I remember in the episode where I think he showed up. He gets a he sabotages the Defiance cloaking system
Hmm.
because Cisco had been disobeying the orders of an admiral, and
Hmm.
like in that episode, he's proving himself to be super loyal to the Federation to the point where he's obeying a superior officer to his immediate commanding officer. And now it turns out like he's a hardcore Maquis operative who gets all like his little monologue where he's all pissy about the Federation and the Maquis. I'm like, this comes
Oh,
out of nowhere.
that whole thing to me sounded so much like a ploy. He's like, "Oh, I have no thoughts about
Yeah.
them whatsoever. If I'm told to arrest them, my key, I'll arrest them, my key. If I'm told to help them, I'll help them." I was like, and he's like, anything else, and especially that last part, anything else is an indulgence. I was like, if what better "I'm a villain hiding in plain sight" line could there be? There isn't one.
Well,
When he
now
said
in
that, I was
retrospect,
like,
for me now in retrospect, yeah, I get it. For me, I was thinking about O'Brien in that moment because O'Brien and what's happening in that scene for everyone is Eddington is with O'Brien and Worf on the Defiant, and they are seeing that Cassidy is interacting with the Marquis, and they start having a little argument amongst the three of them, particularly O'Brien and Worf, about the merits of the Marquis' moral cause. O'Brien is sympathetic. He's saying, look, they're just trying to defend themselves. Worf is like, they're terrorists and they need to be brought to justice. I would never fall
Worf
down
is
to
never
their
he's
level.
never fun in these conversations. The
Yeah.
man
Well, he's
can't
also a little,
enjoy, he can't just entertain any kind of philosophical whatever. He's just
well,
ugh,
yes.
ugh.
Well, and I was rolling my eyes at Worf because I was like, in that moment, who's calling who terrorists? Because that's the problem. If they're being labeled terrorists, but from their perspective, they're not. They're freedom fighters. So Worf just I want to hey, Worf, it's not necessarily always up to you to say who's a terrorist
which
or not. You can say you're not, but someone else can. Are you going to be the one who just takes the label
which my
and runs with it, or
Well, and that's
yeah,
my problem with Worf because he's always been the one who can recognize an honorable and just cause, and regardless
right,
of anything else, if the cause is just and the cause is honorable, then it's worth
right,
fighting for. It's worth dying for. Well, that's something that we
right,
heard plenty of times throughout the entire run of the Next
right,
Generation, and for Worf to step on board Deep Space Nine after all that time and say, "Oh, nope, they're terrorists. The Federation said they're terrorists, so they're terrorists." This bothers me, and I think that's one of the
right.
things that also stands out in my mind as to why, like, then Eddington's subpar, well, it's an indulgence. It just, ugh, the whole conversation was a
Yeah,
failure. Just all of
right.
it. I mean, like, the chief is trying to have a kind of a philosophical debate here, which again is something that we should be used to when watching Star Trek. And the fact that these two other characters are so wholly not engaging and being so adamant in this whole "I have no opinion" or "my opinion is so draconian that there's no other option" really just bothers me. Um,
Well, the reason editing got away for it from me is because again I was paying more attention to the O'Brien Worf argument, and actually in my own head was like trying to think like what do I think about it.
mhm.
So when Eddington was being a wet rag, he's always been a wet rag. I was
He's
like
just
he's always been a
he
wet
has
rag.
he's just awful. I don't. And that's one of the things I've never liked him. And
Right.
yeah, I knew that he was going to be the villain. When it finally was revealed that he was the Maqui, whatever, I was like, of course you are. Of course you
Yeah.
are.
But again, for me, it was frustrating when he's revealed as the Marquis operative because we've never, up to this point, ever really seen. We've never seen him do anything that would lead us up until this point to say that that's who he is. I mean, he's again rag. He was super. Again he sabotaged the Defiant, so he's already proved himself willing to be subversive. But then
Hmm.
I was reading, I was trying to remember all that he's been a part of. He's in one episode. He's one of those that help with the whole, like there's the whole transporter malfunction, and so they have to like keep track of the neural patterns of the people, like Cisco and the others, and so the Hollow Suite was having to be where they kept them, and like he helps like bring them back. So
Hmm.
I feel like he's been a loyal Federation officer this whole time. That's what I'm really getting at. I've never felt like he's not anything other than a good Federation yes man. He's been a yes man the whole time, and then to find out that he's actually been this deep cover Federation plant, like I just feel like they
Or
felt like they
Maqui
needed to.
plan,
Yeah,
deep
they
cover Maqui plan. Yeah, which
they
I
needed
wonder.
to do
I
something with
wonder
him in
why
this
they went that
episode.
route. Like, I wonder
Yeah,
why it became Eddington. Because you're right. Like, when we first meet Eddington, yes, he's Mister Dyed in the Wool. I'm a hardcore Federation Starfleet officer. And then, yeah, like you said, that episode, that was actually a great episode where he and Odo had to work together to bring our crew back from their Hollow Suite misadventure.
right.
He worked so hard and so diligent, so it almost won him a few points. And maybe that was the point of that episode, was to kind of throw you off of this guy who's kind of anti our crew, our heroes that we've come to know already at that point.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I've never liked that character, and it's
Right.
not like some of the other more obvious characters who were set up to be instant, foils or villains or whatever, and they're easy to identify. He's just one that I just didn't like,
Yeah.
and
Well,
yeah, that's
my
that for
problem
me.
is I feel like they didn't have this plan for his character. We haven't even seen him in several episodes. I feel like they felt like they needed something to happen, and not only
Yeah,
did they do this to Eddington's character, but they also do it to dang it, Cassidy. Cassidy's also
yeah,
suddenly a Maquis person, and again, it's interesting. I think, like, as you pointed out as we started this episode, it makes for an interesting story, an interesting episode of Deep Space Nine. But man, it feels like I find it funny. I was recently just, as we did in our last episode, kind of complaining that they're not tying together all of the major plot points. They're like kind of letting the big kind of plot elements just kind of go away. They're not really dealing with them. And
hmm
then in this one, they like make some big changes. Cassidy, the girlfriend of Cisco, is actually a smuggler who's been deceiving him the whole time. Eddington's even worse. He's been a deep plant since he first got there.
hmm
I was like, I feel like we got a lot of changes all in one episode. Um, yeah,
So
yeah,
so I feel like this would be a great time to kind of segue into bringing back a segment they haven't done in a while, our spotlight on the 90s, because this episode was directly inspired by something that occurred in 1995, and
right,
that would be the Oklahoma City bombing,
right,
which, for those of you who, like myself and David, I'm not sure if you were old enough for this one because I was quite young when this happened.
right,
The Oklahoma City bombing is where Timothy McVeigh blew up that federal building, and he killed a bunch of people, including a lot of children who were in the daycare on the bottom floor in the building. Um, this episode was directly inspired by that. In particular, it was just as we were talking about a minute ago, um, when who's to be considered a terrorist, because when the initial shock of the bombing and everything in 1995 happened, everyone was just so sure that this was a attack from the Middle East. This was some Middle Eastern enemy that we had that had just, you know, struck a blow against America and so forth, only for us to
right,
discover that it was actually Timothy McVeigh, this American citizen. So
right,
they were trying to, when they were coming up with the episode, they were trying to do something along those lines. Who would our suspicions fall on, things like that, ultimately for it to turn out to be someone that you least expect. I think that
right,
where we lose the plot on that is with the involvement of Cassidy, because the point was to make it to where the big reveal of the terrorist being someone that we least suspect was supposed to be Eddington. But Eddington in this episode and the lead up throughout the episode makes it to where he's kind of obvious. Cassidy would have been more devastating if it all ultimately ended up being Cassidy who had arranged the whole thing, not just someone who was duped into leading Ben astray or splitting his focus so that Eddington could get one over on him. Because that's really how she works out. She's not, a Maqui herself, but
right,
she brokers some deals and trades with them. She's kind of a complicit, individual in all this. And I think they did
right,
that also because, well, the compelling storyline of Ben Cisco falling in love and starting this new romance was one they
right,
didn't want to drop. They really liked Penny Johnson Gerald, the woman who plays Cassidy Yates, and she
right,
worked well. She had great chemistry with Ben Cisco, with Avery Brooks. So they clearly worked well together. And I think they just didn't want to entirely drop that, but they did want to add a little, little spice, little color to the dynamic of their relationship. And this was a way of them doing that. And then they also cleverly don't have to pay her now because now she's in jail for the next 2 years. So we don't have to see Cassidy
ah,
for a while, but she can still kind of be there in Cisco's
ah.
mind,
Give us a
influencing
little
things.
hint that she'll come back at some point. Are you?
Oh, did I mess that up? Was that mild spoiler?
You don't seem
Dropped in there, sprinkled in there.
all that ashamed about your
No,
reveal there.
mainly because,
She's great.
like I said, I like Cassidy. I've always liked Cassidy.
Yeah.
I like what she does for Ben, and I like, once again, this is, we were just talking about, not in our 100th, but the episode before that, the necessity of having Jennifer die. The mirror, even though it was mirror Jennifer. And seeing how Ben had moved on from that, and then the episode was less about showing how much Ben had moved on, but also how much Jake had matured and moved on.
Right.
And now in this episode, we see them functioning together on a whole other level. That, Ben, Jake, and Cassidy, and there's a lot of familiarity. There's a lot of intimacy here, and we also see a scene where Cisco seems to recognize that if this turns out that Cassidy is involved with the Maqui, that she's a smuggler, that she's going to get arrested and everything else, that could change his relationship with his son. And so he
Right.
takes a moment, as Ben is always doing, and I love to see, he takes a moment to tell his son how important their relationship is. Things
Right.
change, stuff happens, but this between us is
Right.
important and it cannot change. And even
Right.
though, Jake's a little, nervous because his dad's kind of freaking him out a little bit, understandably, he gets it.
Right.
Again, a great episode for all of everything else that's going on. It's great the way that it highlights the Cisco family dynamic, and it's
Okay.
handled so well. They do such a great job with it. For all their other hits and misses and everything else, they do that very well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He again kisses him on the head. Yeah, the whole arm grabbing his his hand and then his arm and I think it was his arm in his hand, whatever. But yeah, saying like this will never change because he's distressed that his relationship with Cassidy has changed because he now knows that she's a Maqui smuggler. She's been hiding that from him and effectively we've been using him. That's the thing that also I found a little frustrating about it was like I didn't get the feeling beforehand that Cassidy was anything other than just regular freighter captain. Again, it's more exciting to have her be a Marquis smuggler. Um, but I feel like this episode brought about those changes all at once. Like I wish there'd been a little bit of lead up. Again, a two-parter. We have some inklings of something being wrong in one episode, and then in the second episode we get the reveal. We get the breadcrumbs planted that wait a minute, maybe there's something about Cassidy, maybe something about Eddington that's more sinister than we knew, and then in part two the reveal. But whatever, can't always ask for everything. But the real thing I want to say, I feel like Cisco should have had. I mean, he's emotionally invested with Cassidy, but I feel like he should have already known. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. I do like the fact that when he's confronted by Odo and Eddington, he says, "I'm not going to let you just do anything without probable cause. All you have right now is circumstantial evidence. But if you ever have something, use it. You have permission to use your information as you see fit, as long as it's a legitimate excuse to do whatever it is you need to do." And that's where Odo comes up with we need to inspect your cargo because there's a viral outbreak on Bajor, etc. A weak
Mhm.
excuse. I don't think it really flew very well, but okay, whatever. There's a legitimate reason to search the cargo. And then
Yeah, what do you say? Temeclian virus.
yeah, but then she immediately calls up Cisco. And by the way, the editing was a little off there because Cisco had the camera. Like she hits the button and he answers immediately. Like he already knew she was gonna call. It's like, wait a minute, I think your editing here, guys, could use a little work. But anyway, um, but yeah, like she basically uses him, says, "Oh, I have to be somewhere on time." I wish that he had called in Kira. What I think he should have done is said, "Okay,
You
Kira
know,
is my second in command.
that's absolutely
I
right.
I
Yeah.
can't trust my judgment here, Kira. I
Hmm.
and either you keep me in the loop or don't or
Hmm.
something there to give a second opinion." And I feel like Starfleet would have that kind of regulation in place. If a Starfleet officer,
If you notice, a lot of this episode, it makes all the decisions between Cisco, Odo, and Eddington.
and
Everybody
that's
else is just following orders, or they're not even there.
yeah, Kira and Dax almost don't even show up. Kira only shows up briefly in a couple scenes, and that's like to get shot at, for example.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and I just feel like Odo dropped the ball here in that
yeah,
perspective. I feel like he's the one who should have said, "Sir, I I I'm
yeah.
concerned that you're this is not because I don't trust your judgment. I know you're going to do the honorable thing, but just for your own protection, I feel you should bring in Kira." And maybe the argument would have been, Kira is more representative of the Bajoran government, and they're implicated with the whole, smuggling here.
Hmm.
If this turned out to be smuggling, so maybe she's not the right person to talk to. But anyway, however, this is another example. I just want to say, just admit on my own end, this is an example of me wanting my characters, my protagonists, to do the right thing the first time.
Oh no.
Whenever
Mm.
whenever you have like that moment where like someone insults you and then like an hour later you're like, I should have said this, I should have said that. Like that's so often what I'm thinking about. Like like even O'Brien was like saying I like the Marquis, like what I said, I kind of like the Marquis too. So part of me was like Cisco should have been a man and called him Kira and said, I need you to handle this for me. But it wouldn't have it,
Had the same impact.
yeah, it would have solved the problem a little too easily. It's supposed to be an emotional conflict that he
Yeah.
has. Again, my problem isn't that the conflict exists. It's just more that it seemed like it just kind of came up on us really quickly. Because again, I mean, just last time we saw her, she was getting, trying to get on the station. She's having that whole emotional conflict with Ben of like, do you want me here or not? Like she just seemed like a normal person, and that's what I feel like sometimes storylines have a problem of doing. Again, this is actually an example for people who listened to the last episode of what I was complaining about in the Dune prequel books that have been written. Is they take characters who are supposed to be relatively innocuous, relatively minor, and they promote them into these really complicated storylines where they're doing this, they're doing that, and you're hearing all about their backstory, and you're like, this character didn't need all that. This character was just supposed to be a normal person. That's why they were there. Is like, that's like, this is an example of a normal person being affected by everything that's going on. So yeah, uh, yeah.
Well,
So
so a couple of things I just wanted to touch on really quick. You said that you had wished that they had made Eddington a changeling. So this will also go back to some of the things because again, in the early '90s, there were just the beginnings of internet chat rooms and forums and things like that. Well, actually, that was the rumor going around was that Eddington was a changeling, and the writers had decided to change that and to make sure that he was not a changeling. They had other plans for him, so that's why even though he would have been ideal as a changeling, they decided not to go that route. Also, another thing that I always wondered: Eddington shoots Kira and effectively takes command of the station because Kira is obviously Cisco's first officer. However, what about Dax? If Cisco, Worf, Odo, and O'Brien are all on the Defiant, where's Dax? So if Eddington shoots Kira, he can't just assume command without taking out Dax too. We never see that happen. And when he leaves Lieutenant Reese in command after, he does this thing, why didn't Lieutenant Reese attempt to contact Kira or contact Dax? It doesn't make any sense. So somewhere along the way, everybody entirely forgot about Dax being on the station and being a commander in her own right. She would be the next in line if Kira goes down. Well, if Worf's not there, she'd be the next in line. Didn't happen. So these are little things
right,
that I wonder about in their consistency. I understand they were trying to just tell a story and get us to certain, points here and there, but
right,
there were too many little loose ends like that. Like, if once Dax realizes that Kira is not responding for whatever particular reason, she would have assumed command and she would have stopped Eddington, or at least
right,
slowed him down a bit until Cisco and company could have got back. But we
right.
never see that.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, when you put a station on, no in or out contacts for 9 hours, as Eddington says he does, that's a long time. Yeah, someone would have said, "Wait a minute, like
Yeah, he says
this
the
is
next nine
important."
hours, right?
Yeah. So, I again, I just feel like Eddington coming out of nowhere being the villain was like what?
Yeah, like that the last part of it where Eddington's plan really needs to go off without a hitch. There are so many errors. He
Right,
shoots Kira and locks her in a room, but he doesn't kill her, he just stuns her, and he says that
right,
we're going to be in communications blackout for the next 9 hours. So he's depending on this station, no one on the station realizing that they can't talk to anyone for 9 hours and there's no explanation, and you've got
right,
junior officers running around doing everything. The guy who just said that who was in command and giving orders, he suddenly stops communicating because he takes his communicator off
right,
and gets on board the ship and takes off. So if anybody had any questions and they're trying to funnel him through to Reese being a junior officer, he would have been inexperienced. He would have tried to talk to somebody.
right.
And if Dax shows up as a senior officer, what? Like there are too many questions here. And again, the 9 hour blockage of time. That's a lot of time for no one to be like, "Hey, where's the major? Why is
Right.
this door locked?" No one asked. So, and what kind of phaser
Yeah.
setting did he use that he
Um,
was able to knock her out and she's not going to wake up for 9 hours?
it just and for me it's like, why would Eddington have been on the station for this long and now choose to blow his cover? I mean, don't get me wrong. Replicators like this sounds like they're powerful items. Maybe this is exactly the type of thing
Yeah,
you blow your cover for.
I
You
mean,
can't.
that's what I always took it as. The replicators are just too good of a target to pass up.
Right. Um, so yeah, I understand it. It's just I feel like him being the traitor of, and again, him being a Maqui traitor is the one. If he had turned out to be a changeling, if he had been a changeling the whole time, that would have been fine. That would have explained a ton of things. But no, he wasn't. He's just a guy. And again, I guess I haven't got to this point yet. His little monologue
At the end, we were coming
was,
up to it. We were going to get to it. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, it's just he's so full of vitriol for Cisco and the Federation. You Federation won't leave us alone. It's like, dude, you've been a part of the Federation for like 2 years, as far as we know. Like, I don't
And for
know.
longer, because you made it all the way through the academy, you made it all the way through security training. You were posted on other ships before you even got to Deep Space Nine, because they
Right,
never would have sent you there if you hadn't had a proven track record. So you went through all of this just to steal some replicators. And that's what
right,
Cisco says. I'm going to drop you in a hole and make you grow old, and you're going to be wondering if it was ever worth it,
right,
you know?
right. Yeah, and Cisco saying all that for me just felt, it felt funny because it felt like a little bit of an overreaction at that point, because his girlfriend just betrayed him, and now his officers betrayed him, and this guy just went off on this monologue. Like, I let me say, just put it this way. I know that I would be emotionally invested in saying something like, "I'm gonna throw you in a cell forever," but part of me wishes that Cisco had gone like super cold, like emotionally dead for a bit, where he's not
I'm
like, you know what I'm saying? Where
I
he's
feel like he got there. Like
a
he
little bit,
started to rise up a bit. You can see, the chest puff out a bit. But then at the end, he tells him, he's, I'm gonna see that you're brought before a court martial that will break you, and then I'm gonna drop you in the
yes,
middle of drop you in a penal colony where you will grow old, and you will wonder if 12 replicators was really worth it. And that's
yes,
how it ends. And I
right,
mean, it is a colder delivery, but you could tell he was seething a bit there. And yeah, so I get that, and I love it when he does do the ruthless delivery of the threat, which we haven't seen in Cisco for a while. He was great at those threats in
yes,
season 1 and 2. We saw
right,
him do it a few times, but yeah, now we're seeing that bit of that fire coming through. He's not letting things go.
right,
Um, but yeah, Eddington's speech at the end was just ridiculous. Oh, you're worse than the Borg. At least they tell you about their simulation. And of all people, for
yeah,
him to talk about the Borg too, I was just
yeah,
like, you know what? Now I really hate you. Like I didn't like you before. Now
yeah,
you've crossed the line, and you're lecturing about why this gives you the right to steal and shoot people and all the rest of it.
right. Right.
Come
Yeah,
on, man.
exactly. Yeah, it that's where the Maquis certainly get a little bit uppity, where it's like, okay, guys, this is why we have problems with you guys, is because you don't.
You
While
just
I
take stuff.
agree, yeah,
You took your legitimate cause and you started to use it as a reason to hurt other people, which
right,
we're all taught since, forever. You don't do that. There are
right.
ways in which you can resolve your conflict, and y'all just totally abandon all of it. Now, granted,
Well,
the Cardassians are out there murdering people,
that's the
but
great irony about the whole Federation. It was the Federation who abandoned these colonists. Not that they were trying to assimilate the colonists; they were abandoned by the Federation to the
and
Cardassian predation. That was
And
always
did
the
they
argument.
but did they truly abandon them? Because if we
Yeah,
go back and we watch the episode where again the demilitarized zone was established and this whole thing kicks off, the Federation said, yes, you lived in this zone. We apologize that this is happening, but in order to keep a larger, lasting peace, we need all of you guys to relocate. They all said, "Nah, I'm not going to do
right,
that. I'm not going to move."
right,
And so they said, "Well, if you stay, that means you are no longer a Federation citizen and you will no longer have
our
our
protection.
resources or protection." And they said, "Yeah, that's fine.
Right,
We'll take up with these guys who've been murdering us for weeks. We're going to take up with them
right,
anyway because now that we're
right.
not a part of you, they won't hate us." And the Cardassian said, "Hold my beer." and proceeded to
Yeah.
brutalize them further.
Right.
And then the Federation still was like, all right, you're not Federation citizens, but you're still human, so we'll try. And that's when his friend Hudson, Cal Hudson, gets roped in, and he's a
Right.
mediator. He doesn't have any power or authority in the militarized zone, but he's
Right.
trying to work things out. But he ends up getting swayed to their cause and says,
Right.
screw it. If the Federation's not going to help us and support us, which, again, they
Right.
voluntarily revoked,
Right.
they say,
Exactly.
"Well, screw it. We're just going to take it anyway." Well, wait a
Right.
minute. No, because they offered all of you whole planets for you to
Right.
settle on, endless
Yep.
resources at your disposal. We will take you there. We will set you up with facilities. We will help you construct homes and schools and factories. We'll do everything to make it as easy as possible to move you from where you are, where it's dangerous, to
Right.
over here where it's not. And they all said no.
Right.
And then when they got what they wanted, now all of a sudden it's the Federation's problem. Y'all are worse than the Borg. No, if you go to the Borg and say, you know what, I don't really feel like being assimilated today. Guess what? Nanoprobes right in your neck. It's like you didn't
Yeah.
even say
Yeah.
anything. You're still
You will
going
be
down.
assimilated. Yeah.
So I always hate it when they try to make those kind of analogies because it's like, no, the Federation has given you ample time, opportunity, options, everything you need to make whatever transition as easy as possible. The
Right.
Federation flagship came out to get you
Right.
and move you.
Right.
They and you still said no.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. His whole speech about like basically how I hate the Federation, and it's just like
Yeah. And they're like, well, we just want to live differently from you. We want to live freely from you. The Federation isn't stopping you. They were
right.
just moving you to a planet where you wouldn't, I don't know, get bombs dropped on you from orbit or have shock
Well,
troopers show up and murder your people in the streets or whatever it was the
well,
Cardassians were doing.
and the whole thing here too is the Cardassians are being decimated by the Klingon invasion. So first off, question is why aren't the Maqui being affected by the Klingon invasion? Why aren't the Klingons basically also saying, "Hey, demilitarized zone is our zone as well"? So I would think the Maqui, if they're a little bit smart, would be like, "Wait a minute, we lost one enemy but gained another," kind of thing. Um,
Because it splits the Cardassian tactic by give because what we end up learning, and it was supposed to actually be in this episode. It's one of those behind the scenes apocrypha things. We end up learning that the Klingons actually started arming the Maquis and any other citizens willing to fight the Cardassians in the demilitarized zone. That's why
uh,
they were able to also strike such definitive blows suddenly against the Cardassians. By making the Cardassians also have to fight a war on two fronts, that was allowing the Klingons to have more and more
ah,
success. That's why they
gotcha.
didn't take them out. I'm sure they totally planned to be like, once we handle this Cardassian problem, we will have the combined military forces of Klingons and Cardassians to go and wipe out the Marquis. We'll do
Right.
that later, but
Right.
right now, the enemy of my enemy.
Yeah, good point. Okay, that makes more sense actually. Um, but it also shows how short-sighted the Maquis are.
Because the Maquis don't care. They don't
Yeah.
care. They try to make it sound like they're doing this noble thing to protect their families and homes and everything else. But the simple fact is, they don't like Cardassians, and they've gotten to the point where now it's not really about protecting their homes. It's about fighting Cardassians.
Right. Yeah,
That's
they're
it.
just full of hatred at this point,
Yeah.
which is a bummer because there's no happy ending to that storyline, I would
There's
assume.
not. There's
Yeah.
absolutely not. And and if you watch Voyager, you really know there's not. Um, yeah,
Which I
the
guess by
Maquis.
this point in season 4 was at least one season in by now.
Yes. So at this point, yeah, Voyager would have been starting to wrap up season one by now. So yeah, but
Okay.
we find out in season,
Okay.
I think it's season five of Voyager, the the fate of the Maquis. So yeah,
Ah,
um,
Star Trek Voyager was
yeah. So that
1995,
then,
so
yeah.
January of
So then, yeah,
95.
season four here, season one there. Yeah.
Right.
But
Oh
yes.
boy.
Well, I think that's gonna pretty much do it for us on this one. Any final thoughts on uh, our various shades of gray or our favorite pedophilic space lizard, Garrick?
Thanks for that. By the way, on that point, apparently the actress who played the character, whose name I can't remember at the moment,
Torres.
she did not play the. Yeah, this is her first time playing the character because that other actress is not playing her this time, and apparently someone else picks up the role in the future.
This was their attempt. I
Interesting
because I
little
feel like it was they did this for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the first actress,
age the character
right?
up.
The first character that played the first actress who played her was a bit young. Then we have this next one who plays her, and while older, still a bit too young. And so now they wanted to skip her ahead even more, so we get a third
Are you
actress.
saying they realized it that they
Yeah,
didn't
I
do it
think
enough, and so
yeah,
they
I think they realized it
should be a
after the
30-year
fact.
old next time?
I think they realized it after the fact, and they're like, you know what,
Cardassians age
we
quickly.
need to fix this. Oh, fix this quick.
Oh man. Oh man. So more of the Garrick romance. Interesting,
I
huh?
will say that I've always felt that the actress who plays her, the third and final incarnation of CL, always felt like she was much better looking than the other ones that we
Ah,
get. So,
well, I would hope so. If Garrick's gonna be making out with anybody.
so, but yeah, it doesn't change the fact that she's still like
Oh man.
18, and she really should have been going after Jake of all people. I would think that would have been an interesting
Yeah,
pairing of Jake
that's
and
actually a good
Ducat's
point.
daughter,
That'd be a fantastic point because she's already a half Bajoran, half
and
Cardassian.
now
Add in a
we'll sprinkle a
half
human.
human.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1/4 Bajoran, 1/4 Cardassian, one half human,
yeah. So
and
yeah,
what
that
do you
that
get?
offspring would be half human. Yeah, quarter Bajoran, quarter Cardassian. What would you look
Yeah,
like? Mm.
yeah, because her ridges are already fainter than all the other
And her skin is
Cardassians. She's
more
got
and
the
her skin
nose
is more
ridge.
pink, and she's got the prominent nose ridge. So then throw in a
Right.
splash of human, man. Would she even? Well, she'd probably still have all of the ridges and everything else, but they'd probably be way less pronounced.
Their
Yeah,
kids, yeah, their kids would be weird.
but
But yeah, poor Jake missing out to Garrick here.
well, Jake apparently loves older women since he went after Marta first, and
Well,
then
according to the
Anaya.
show. uh,
Man.
all right. We've talked about this one enough.
Well, all right then.
Uh,
That will definitely do it for us. For this week, of course, all Trek is pretty much done for now as the writer strike continues. I do know that Lower Decks, their fourth season, they did finish it before the writer strike, so that should be released here soon. Discovery, same goes for their fifth and final season. I think that comes out in October. Prodigy, the show that was on Nickelodeon, also was canceled, but they did finish their second or third season. I think it was the third season. They did finish it, so that's supposed to be released. Whether or not Prodigy and Lower Decks comes back at all, no one knows because the strike has really kind of just messed up a lot of things. But we do know that Discovery will be ending for sure after the fifth season. Other than that, you can find us and follow us anywhere that you do the social medias, and you can listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. So until next week, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.